Hi everyone, Misty Kerpak with Epic Realty out here in beautiful Boise. I wanted to do just a really quick recording talking about appraisal waivers. This is something that I am seeing in the market every single day right now. And I'm sure if you guys have friends that are buying or selling, you probably heard about it too. But what I wanted to do is let you guys know what that means when you talk about appraisal waiver, because this matters whether you're a buyer or a seller, or if you plan to do one of those in the coming months. As you guys have, I'm sure, heard, Boise is an incredibly competitive market right now. When I say Boise, I'm talking Nampa, Caldwell, Eagle, all of it, like the whole Treasure Valley right now is bananas. So if you are selling your home right now, there is a very, very, very strong chance that you're going to see offers that could reach 25,000, 50,000, 75,000, or even $100,000 over asking price. I am not joking about that. That is real numbers that I have seen on offers. Those are the real amounts that sellers are getting on their homes over asking right now in this market. Now, the thing to keep in mind is when you live in a neighborhood and you have a bunch of homes that are selling, at a pretty comparable prices, meaning let's say you have a $300,000 home and all the homes in your neighborhood over the past few months have sold with similar features, similar square footage, similar garage and bedroom count, and they've all sold for $300,000. And then you get an offer for $1 million. Oh boy, that's amazing, right? But what you need to understand is it does not matter what the offer is if it can't close. So if somebody is doing a loan, and that's a big chunk of our market is people that are doing different loans, they are going to need to have an appraisal done. And an appraiser is a way for the bank to protect the buyer by making sure you're not significantly overpaying on a home. And it's also to protect them to make sure they're not over leveraging themselves on a loan. Meaning if you have a $300,000 house and the offer's at $500,000 house, that $200,000 gap is a pretty big risk to a bank, meaning they're not going to lend on that. So what's happening in this market is you have a lot of people that are coming in with cash that are offering to waive that appraisal. Now that's great, but there's definitely some things that you want to keep in mind before you do it. Now on the buyer side, if you're a buyer, you may run into these offers. You may go to put an offer in and everybody else has waived their appraisal or they've been doing different things. So it's not to say that you shouldn't do that, but if you go there, you need to understand what you're getting into, and you do need to understand the different ways you can structure it and protect yourself, and maybe set caps on things just so you're not writing a blank check to a seller and not protecting yourself at all. So what I have done is I've worked up a couple scenarios that I've actually presented just in the past week. So these are actual real-time offers that I'm going to run through, and I want to point out a couple things on here so that it'll give you a little bit more clarity about what I mean with appraisal waiver. So here is a scenario that I wrote earlier this week. The house was listed at $350,000. This house was in Meridian. The offer that my clients and I decided to write was a $420,000 house purchase price. So now you're looking at a $70,000 gap. Now, what was interesting about this house is at 350, it was underpriced. I did the research on this. I pulled all the comps. I always do that for every single offer. I always want to know where this house should be priced. And this house, in my opinion, should have been listed closer to $380,000, $390,000. However, they listed it here. Now, I'm not sure if that was an inexperienced agent not knowing or not understanding what she was looking at, or if this was just a strategy to drive the bidding war. Could be either. But either way, we had an offer of $420,000. My clients, we talked about this ahead of time, and they were doing a 3% down. Now, the reason we did 3% instead of doing a higher amount was so that we had more leverage with our appraisal gap if we needed to go there. And then they had their closing costs. So what's important to understand with this is this gap between $350,000 and $420,000 being 70 grand. That's a lot of cash. What people need to understand when they're doing these is that that does not come out of your down payment. Meaning if you have any kind of gap, you need to be aware that you need to bring the gap plus your down payment plus your closing costs. That is something that I don't think a lot of people completely understand when they do this. They assume that, oh, well, I'm putting $20,000 down. That we should be able to waive the appraisal for that $20,000. That's not what it means. It means that if there's a gap, you have to bring that in addition to your closing costs and to your down payment. So the other thing I want to point out on this 3% is clearly with my clients potentially having to bring $90,000 out of pocket, there was a lot of cash on hand. So our strategy was to go in with a lower down payment, give us some wiggle room to play with those appraisal numbers. And then if appraisal came in fine, they could up their down payment. So these are all options that you can discuss with a lender and kind of work through. The other house that I wrote an offer on just a couple of days ago was listed at $275,000. This was in Nampa. Our offer was for $285,000. Now, what's interesting about this one is when I pulled the comps, there were no good comps. So I was seeing houses that were similar to our list home that were selling around $240,000. And that is a lot lower. That already means there's a big gap between the appraisal and the comps that I'm seeing. So that's a concern and kind of a red flag right into the gate. But we know that in this market, they're still going to get higher than asking, and there's a good chance they'll get there. So my client had an additional $6,500 in their closing costs, and their down payment was $8,550. So what you can see is their appraised difference between 275 and 285 was 10,000. Now what we ended up doing is we ended up capping that. So instead of just saying we're waiving the appraisal, we instead said we will cover the difference between the purchase price and the appraised value up to this amount. That is really, really, really important, because let's just say hypothetically this appraiser comes out and says, nope, this house isn't worth 275, this house is worth 250. Okay, my clients are still willing to pay 10K over, but we're not going to cover $50,000 or $40,000. They don't have the resources to do that. And in that situation, if we just waived the appraisal, they could be on the hook for that entire difference. That is really, really, really important to know. So the whole point of this is, obviously, I hope that you guys will work with me when it comes to buying and selling. But no matter what, you need to work with a professional who understands and who can go back and forth with your lender and work through all these numbers. So before I write any offers, I am back and forth with the lender. I'm figuring out how much cash they have on hand, and we're working through all these numbers. There is a lot of different intricacies to appraisals. So everything from the type of loan you have, whether it's conventional FHA or VA, or, again, like what those comps are, you need to know all those factors before you start writing offers, and definitely be very careful about waiving appraisal and doing just a blank check unless you have very, very solid evidence that your house is going to at least get to certain milestones. So agents need to be really understanding the comps. Do your research, call pendings in the neighborhood, find out what's closing when. And if you are a seller in this market, it's really important to make sure that whoever you're working with is picking up the phone, is calling the agents, it's talking to the lenders, and potentially asking for proof that there is funds on hand to cover that potential difference if that becomes an issue. Otherwise, you may end up in the end not getting the offer that you were promised, and you either have to lower your price or start completely over. And that's not an ideal thing. Again, the biggest thing I definitely want to stress is, if you are a new buyer entering this market, I know this sounds really scary to be waiving appraisals and you hear of offers going, $50,000 and $100,000 over asking. I do want to make sure you understand. I just had an offer that got accepted this past week where my clients did not go over asking price, and we did not waive any appraisal. We did not jump through any of the hoops right now that you hear people jumping through. The interesting thing was, I would say in all the houses we saw, which was a lot, this was probably one of the top 3 houses that we saw in terms of condition, upgrades, etc. So there are homes that you can get without having to do all this, but that also has its own strategy, which I'll address in another time. But If you are looking to buy or sell, this appraisal thing is big right now, and I would love to help you understand it more. If you have any questions on it, please feel free to reach out. And if you're a new agent or if you're thinking about buying or selling, please reach out to me. I'm happy to kind of walk you through this and talk to you about how this would look for you. You can reach me at 208-350-1726. And hopefully this information was helpful. Thanks. Bye-bye.